Good morning. Today we're continuing with the laws of davening, and we're talking about tefillas tashlumin. What happens if you forget to daven? You forget to daven shacharis, mincha, marav. You were busy. You didn't forgot all about it. Forgot to go to minyan. Forgot to daven at home. So what do you do? So let's learn. 108.1. Ta oinenas. If one made a mistake, or circumstances happened that were beyond his control. Velo is pal shacharis, and he didn't daven shacharis. He forgot to daven the morning service. Mispalal mincha shtayim. He should daven mincha twice. That's what we do. If someone forgets to daven, the next service he should daven 2 times to make up for the one that he missed. Harishona mincha v'hashniya l'tashlumin. The first one is for mincha, and the second one is for tashlumin. So anytime we forget to daven because of a mistake or because circumstances beyond our control, we daven the next service twice. So if you forget shacharis, you daven mincha twice, and the first shmona esrei is for mincha, and the second one is a tashlumin, what's called for shacharis. V'im hipech lo yatsi de tefillah shi tashlumin. And if you reversed it, if the first one you daven was for tashlumin and the second one was for mincha, you did not fulfill the mitzvah of davening a tefillas tashlumin. It didn't count. V'tzarich lachzor l'spalasan. You have to go back and daven it again. So then you got 3 shmona esreis. V'chein hadin b'chol makom shetzarich li'yispalal tefillah tashlumin. And this is the law every time you have to daven tefillas tashlumin. So let's start the Mishnah Brura. Ta made a mistake. Kavanaso la'afuke hizid. What does it mean to say he made a mistake? It means that this halacha of davening tefillas tashlumin is only if you didn't daven by mistake. But if you purposely didn't go to davening, then you do not daven a tashlumin. So if for some reason you just woke up and you're like, I don't feel like davening today. I would rather sit in bed, eat breakfast and bread, and watch a movie. In that case, you would not daven mincha twice. You would not daven a tefillas tashlumin. It's only if you made a mistake, you forgot to daven, or circumstances beyond your control. Umishalo hispala machma shlo haisa daita nachayna alav karoi after shlo kadinasa uktlael mikol makom einze b'chal mezid umahani le hashlama. Now, the Mishnah Berurah discusses a case. We're going to discuss, God willing, a bunch of cases and if they are considered on purpose missing davening or by accident. So the case that the Mishnah Berurah discusses here is, let's say you didn't daven because you weren't able to have the proper intent. You weren't able to focus on davening. So what did you do? You just waited. You say, no, I'm not going to daven now. I want to wait till I have the proper mindset to be able to pray. And you waited so long that the time of davening passed. So is that considered missing davening on purpose, or is that by accident? So the Mishnah Berurah says, even though you did the wrong thing, meaning even if you can't have like the best kavanah and the best intent, you still are supposed to daven. We're not perfect. We're not always going to have the best intent. So even though you did the wrong thing by not davening, it's not considered on purpose, and you're still able to say a tashlumin, a tefillas tashlumin, at the next service. Okay, onenas. What's a case of circumstances beyond someone's control? Shahayachola o shikar. He was sick, or he was drunk. We're going to talk about more details about getting drunk. What if he had time? What if he got drunk way late into the day and he could have davened before? We'll discuss. But in general, if a person was drunk, we're not supposed to daven when we're drunk. Or if he was sick and he couldn't daven, those are considered circumstances beyond his control, and he can do a tefillas tashlumin. Ula inyan onen she'avar alav zman tefillah ad she'kaver meso ayin le'el b'siman ayin aleph. Now what about an onen? An onen is a person who his close relative passed away, and he is now obligated to deal with the funeral, and he is trying to organize the funeral and make all the arrangements. So that person, halachically, is called an onen, and he is pater from all mitzvahs. He is exempt from performing any commandments, any positive commandments. He still has to keep the negative commandments. So an onen doesn't pray. He doesn't daven shacharis, anything. He doesn't put on tefillin. He doesn't make blessings. So let's say you have an onen, and he was, busy with the very common case. We shouldn't know from it, but an onen who's dealing with the funeral, and the funeral's over after shacharis. So after the time to daven shacharis, so the onen daven 2 minchas, because he wasn't able to daven because he was in this onen status where he was exempt from all mitzvahs when he was preparing the funeral. So the Mishnah Berurah says to look what he wrote earlier, and he wrote earlier that an onen, it's not that he He says, we only daven tashlumin when we were required to daven, but because of circumstances beyond our control, we weren't able to daven. But an onein is different. An onein was never chayev, was never required to daven in the first place. So the Torah, the rabbis, they exempted him. He's exempt from davening. So since he was exempt from davening, he doesn't have to make it up. He doesn't make it up. And over there, actually, he does make a difference. I don't think this case is so common anymore. But let's say someone was an onein. The case we're discussing where he's an onein, let's say the person passed away the night before and the funeral wasn't over until after the time for shachar. So in that case, he doesn't daven again. But let's say the person died mid-morning and they buried him by the afternoon, right? Not so common that this would happen nowadays. But since he already had a requirement to daven at mid-morning before the person died because he wasn't an onein yet, there the Mishnah Berurah says he should daven an extra mincha. So if there was a time of the morning where he was required to daven because he was not yet an onein and just for some reason didn't daven, and then he became an onein, and then the funeral was over after mincha, then he should daven twice. But in another case where he was an onein the entire morning, then he would not daven two Shmona Esreis. Okay, we'll finish here for today, and tomorrow we'll continue discussing this topic and other cases. When do we daven two Shmona Esreis? Have a beautiful, wonderful day.